Hello everyone, Martin here, back with another Legacy Doomsday video. So today it's going to be a little bit of a different thing. I am going to be going over the replays of my recent tournament experience playing in the Sylvan Library Eternal Weekend event. I had an amazing run, an amazing time, and sadly I wasn't able to go all the way, so I took the deck all the way to the finals where I lost. So, for a sort of myriad of reasons, I was not recording while I was playing. So I'm going to be going over the replays. Magic Online saves the replays. And hopefully it'll work. I expect a few hitches here. The replay function isn't always perfect, so we'll see how we go. This is the list I played. And yeah, the deck did really well. I'll just say a few things about my choice. I hadn't originally planned on playing in the Eternal Weekend, but then sort of not last minute, but like a couple of days before the event, I then was able to. I didn't have time to do any testing, so I decided to run the same list that I've been playing sort of on and off at some paper events. I haven't been playing much on Magic Online lately. My reasoning was that I expected this deck to do very well against anything not sort of Ragavan, and probably I was worried about the 8 cast deck. I had noticed that coming up, but I hadn't really had any reps against it, and people were saying it's not that good for us, which I think is probably correct. But I was just thinking if I don't get hit by a lot of those two decks, then this list is just amazing against Death and Taxes, lands. It's pretty good against elves. It just has favorable matchups against all the stuff that's probably around beating on Delver, with Delver being the best deck. So, and that sort of analysis paid off. Obviously, also, you know, a lot of luck has to come in, but you know, we'll take that. So yeah, this is the list. It's I will say that I think going forward I will have to reconsider the red splash. But I'll probably touch on that at the end. So let's jump into the first match. So bottom that, and on the play, I decide to not play Personal Tutor just because. Well, you can definitely argue to do it, but it's a little bit rough when you don't know what you're up against and you're giving them that sort of information, and like very vulnerable to a wasteland. And so this was a Volcanic Island deck, something I wouldn't see a whole lot in this tournament. And I think here, yeah, I decided to go for it. And I remember thinking, well, if they have Ragavan, then this is just going to be like a giant red flag for them to dash him in, tapping out, and not cantripping for interaction, and we can just cycle Street Wraith in response to get to the Doomsday and sort of hopefully whiff on their, like, make their Ragavan whiff. If they do have Ragavan, this could at this point also just be like Sneak and Show or whatever. But you know, you see Volcanic Island, this event, you get your suspicions. Okay, so this is Jeskai, and at this point I still don't know, like, okay, so is this a Saga deck? Does it have Wastelands? Is it like a control deck more than are there even Ragavans? And I get my Petal ended here, and okay, so they cantrip. Now I have to decide if I go for it with just Force backup, or if I try and get like to another land to play around Daze. And I decide to cycle Street Wraith and hope in order to maybe hit a land, which I do. So that was nice. And Doomsday is on the stack. And they Daze it. I pay. And that's it. We get to resolve it. Okay, here is where Magic Online sometimes doesn't like to do replays when resolving Doomsday. Let's see if it works out. So make a pile that is, let's see here, So this is why we have Cavern of Souls in the main when we are up against the blue deck and we can't win on the same turn in game one. So I make this pile. It's soft to double Wasteland. If they have Ragavan, we can sort of put cyclers on top for them to hit. So I put Cavern on the bottom, then Thassa, and then the 3 cyclers, and pass. And they do decide to dash in Ragavan. So now Ragavan will exile a Street Wraith, and I will draw a Street Wraith. And I think I remembered thinking that I should have drawn, like, put it Street Wraith, edge Street Wraith, so that I would draw the edge, and now not the Street Wraith. And then I decide to just go for it, I think. Yeah, so I Brainstorm, and let's have a look here. Put back Force and Street Wraith, and I just go for it here. And then I'm able to cycle into Street Wraith and Street Wraith into Force if they have removal. But they didn't, so I just get to... I just win. So like if they had had Plow or Bolt, I could, in response to that, I could cycle Edge into Street Wraith and cycle Street Wraith into Force and then have a clear library. Alright, so having seen Ragavan, but not having seen Wastelands, I did decide to board, I think, like this was a Delver deck, which means bringing in the 3 Pact of Negation and the 2 Duress and boarding out 4 Force of Will and I think a Personal Tutor. Alright, so for game number 2, let's see. So I get this. Oh yeah, I also brought in Massacre. Forgot about that. So because they showed us the Tundra. And I decided to keep this. It's missing Doomsday obviously, but it has some nice interaction here. A little bit vulnerable to Wastelands. And they have turn 1 Ragavan, so... Alright. So that's obviously not great. And here I decide to go for Thoughtseize. Yeah, and they Daze that. And I thought, like, I'd rather have Thoughtseize dazed than Duress, just because of the life total might end up mattering, and I don't... Like, they already have the Ragavan, so, like, Thoughtseize grabbing a creature seems less critical. Alright, so they play out their land before attacking, which means they can't hit a Wasteland, or, like, they can't Wasteland us here. So we get lucky, and the Ragavan flips a Daze. Okay, so Dragon's Rage Channeler. And now we're just flooding out on Consider, which means I'm going to play one. And I think I put this Pact of Negation in the graveyard. And yeah, I draw Ponder. So getting a little bit awkward here. We really want to find a land. Okay. So they Ponder here with Chandler. They put Wasteland in the graveyard. I remember thinking that was really lucky for me. And a little bit sort of perplexing seeing as they just saw us fail to find the second land drop. So I'm thinking they probably have a Wasteland, but yeah. So Ragavan exiles a Underground Sea, which is, again, lucky, although we also kind of want the Underground Sea, right? So no land drop for them on their 3rd turn. Oh no, never mind, they had the land drop because they Dazed. So we draw Oracle here, which just is pretty awkward. So I decide to Ponder here, looking for lands. And I do find lands. And I take the land and leave Daze on top. And I want to cast Consider, but I also want to be sure that Ragavan isn't like exiling a discard spell or Doomsday. So I want to give them the Daze. And now look, they were nice enough to put a Plains into play. Yeah, so they get the Daze. And oh, that's funny. Okay, so I decided I wanted the Ponder on top. I was just gonna say I could have just considered end of turn. Okay, so we Duress here to see what's up. And also, mind you, Dragon's Rage Chandler doesn't have Delirium right now, but they are only missing one card type in the graveyard. Okay, so here their hand is Force, Reb, and a Murktide. So obviously Murktide can come down next turn and be a bit of a beast. And I remember thinking this is pretty awkward. So I took a Force. And I was thinking, like, if they force this, at least we'll be out of, like, interaction on Doomsday. But they don't. They just let me have their squad. And so, cast Ponder looking for Doomsday. We don't find Doomsday. And we shuffle and get Edge of Autumn. And so they make a giant Murktide. So their hand is a Red Elemental Blast, a Force, and an Unknown. Oh, and we get the Doomsday. So we cast Consider here. And we put Bloodstained Mire in the graveyard and draw Lotus Petal. So our hand is pretty stacked, but we're like desperately missing the interaction we need to beat that Force of Will. Okay, so they swing in for 6. We basically have one draw step now to find interaction, be that Pact or like Duress. So I consider end of turn. That shows us Pact. Yes, thank you very much. We draw Pact. And we draw Duress, which is just amazing because Pact alone wasn't going to do it because they had the Force and the Red Blast. So we just top decked like exactly what we needed. And so we Duress. And so they drew Brainstorm here, which like they've drawn running Brainstorms, which is pretty rough. So we take the Red Blast, leave them with Brainstorm Force, Brainstorm Force. Cast Dark Ritual, cast Doomsday, they Brainstorm in response. And here I just hope they're going to tap out for their Force, but they aren't. Instead, they Brainstorm again, if I remember correctly. Yeah. Okay, so both Brainstorms are gone. And I'm thinking here, okay, so they obviously will have found something. I'm also thinking, being a Prismatic Ending deck, they probably aren't on Bolts. Okay, so they force pitching Ponder, and they now have one card. We Pact. Pact resolves, Doomsday resolves. Alright, so Doomsday resolved. We make this pile, which is, let's have a look here. Brainstorm, Flooded Strand, an Underground Sea to fetch with the Strand, Cavern of Souls. Yeah, this pile doesn't really make any sense. I'm wondering if Magic Online is actually showing this correctly. Because obviously we're never gonna make 2 land drops. Although I do remember this like I spent way too long making this pile, and because I really wanted to beat Daze, and then for a second I thought, okay, this beats Daze, it won't beat a Red Blast, but then I think at the end of it I worked out that it wouldn't beat Daze. So here I think I have to edge into Brainstorm, cast Brainstorm, draw the Flooded Strand, and play Flooded Strand, Underground Sea. This sort of gets us to 2 cards in the deck. So yeah, and Magic Online is bugging me out here because it just showed me putting Brainstorm on the bottom, which obviously is not correct. So cycle, and it shows us drawing Underground Sea here, which would have lost us the match. Okay. Anyways, yeah, sorry that kind of got messed up. It's not even showing the Brainstorm in the deck here, out in the graveyard. But I mean, Yeah, you saw what was there. So I did draw the Brainstorm, and then I had to. This is just wrong too. The Flooded Strand was not there. I played that. Yeah, whatever. Okay, so that was round one. So really stoked to be up 2-0 against this deck, which is sort of like the predator for decks like mine. All right, so round number two. Again, we win the die roll here, and we're up against what turns out to be lands. And in the dark, I think this is a pretty fine keep. This is soft to some things, like things that put critical pressure on you early, or like if I knew that I was up against lands, I'm not sure I would be that stoked about this, but because we have the personal tutor, I think I probably would be. Okay, our opponent took mulligans down to 5 here, so that obviously helped for us. And I think I ponder here. Yeah. Looking for disruption or acceleration. We shuffle these. We get a cavern, which is kind of bad, but we have Brainstorm. So my plan here right now is to cast Brainstorm next turn and then cast probably Personal Tutor and then go for a turn 3 Doomsday. Okay, so they go Caracas Go, which is a little confusing. Makes you think probably Death and Taxes. We draw more lands here, which is not the best. So let's see if Brainstorm can save us. And yeah, that's pretty good. So we put back Cavern. Wait, I lost the other card. Was it Consider maybe? I think. So this way we can get Personal Tutor, and like if we get Wastelanded, we have another land to like rebuy for a turn later. So put Doomsday there. So Caracas Forest, and I'm thinking, okay, this is like depths, or I actually wasn't thinking lands that much, just because the Caracas kind of threw me off. But I'm pretty like I'm tuned into roughly what kind of strategy we're up against. I suppose it could be like a Bant deck, but they would have had that would have been like the worst keep ever. So put Doomsday on the stack. We make this pile here, Edge of Autumn. No. So Ideas Unbound. Let's see, we have 3 lands in play, so even like a Wasteland next turn is not gonna wreck us. We get Thassa, Pact of Negation, Petal, and a land. So what we do here is we draw Ideas Unbound, and we play out Bloodstained Mire. We fetch the sea, leaving us with 3 cards in the deck, which is Petal, Pact, Thassa. So this leaves us with actually Force, Pact, Daze for any sort of interaction they may have, like Endurance, and empties the library, so that's pretty sweet. So we put the land on the bottom that we're going to fetch, and then it doesn't matter just as long as Ideas Unbound is on top, and we pass. So this lets us play around a wasteland. Okay, so we get Stature, so now I'm thinking, okay, it's probably Depths. Like obviously, but like green white Depths or something, or like just Turbo Depths. I don't know. So I'm not too worried that I have to play around anything here. An Endurance at most, and we fetch to get the land, and Bob's your uncle. All right, so pretty easy game 1. Game 2 is quite the doozy. So let's check that out. Okay, so I mean, this is obviously a little bit awkward, seeing as we have 3 Doomsdays, but the rest of the hand is pretty good, and I decided to keep this. Thinking like we either find like Dark Ritual off one of the cantrips, or we find a Brainstorm to get rid of the Doomsdays. Opponent mulligans to 6. They go turn 1 Mox Diamond Bajuga Bog, which is pretty awkward for them. That makes me think they probably have some like interaction, seeing as they kept this. So I'm thinking at this point like probably Red Blast. I'm also thinking, okay, so it is lands. Um, and we draw a second land, which is definitely not the worst. And I decide to pass here to use the lesser of the cantrips, but the one that best plays around like Wasteland. Okay, so here they play Sphere of Resistance, which we can't allow to like, it can't resolve here. With the way we're set up here, we're not winning through a Sphere of Resistance most likely. So I think I decide to go Considering here before I decide what to pitch. Or I guess right now it's only Ponder that is pitchable. And I decide I want to draw the Brainstorm so we can get rid of these Doomsdays. And then I force pitch Ponder. Alright. So draw land, not the best, not the worst. We have the Brainstorm though, so pretty decent. This means a Doomsday next turn. And I put back the 2 extra copies of Doomsday. I regret not playing out the Petal because I'm thinking like, okay, if they have another Sphere, that's pretty dumb. So I should have done that. But then this happens. And I'm thinking, crap. I have nothing in my sideboard that can, or in my 75 that can remove a Torpor Orb. And I didn't bring in Emrakul and Sheldog Isle because that's not this matchup that you bring that in. So honestly, at this point, I'm thinking I'm going to concede. But then I decide, hang on, we do have things in our deck that can actually kill a person. So I decide to not concede and try something that I really didn't think I was going to get away with, but you'll see. So we consider here, we put Lion's Diamond in the graveyard and draw a Daze. So that's pretty unexciting. Draw Force, which is, not the worst. And I play out the fetch land here because I don't want to have to put a fetch land into my pile. And we cast Doomsday. And we make this beautiful pile. I think this is my favorite pile of all the tournament. It's a little bit memey, obviously, but so we put 2 Street Wraiths. We put a Dark Ritual because, as is, we're only going to be able to cast one of them, sort of hard cast, because we lose the Petal. And we put a Force of Negation and a Doomsday. And just say, okay, well, I mean, Torpor Orb be damned. So we make the pile Doomsday on the bottom, then Force of Negation, and then the Dark Ritual and the 2 Street Wraiths. And we play this out to not... Yeah, actually at this point it doesn't matter, because if they go Spirit Resistant next turn, then we still can't hardcast the thing. But they just go land go, and they have 2 cards in hand. You gotta wonder, it's like Endurance or like Pyroblast or something. So, I mean, let's go. So Street Wraith is in. Sadly, no swamps for my opponent. And here they cast Endurance, which I immediately force, because, yeah, you have to. And don't know what the last card was, but if it was a Red Blast, they couldn't cast it because they were sort of choked on red mana. So they have the stage, so if at any point they get to resolve, what do you call it, like Crop Rotation or something to get Dark Depths, I'm obviously dead. But, beggars can't be choosers here, so we draw the second Wraith, can't play it yet. So we just get in there. They play Grove. I mean, now it looks like whatever they have, it's not useful for them, so we're both in top deck mode. I have, of course, Vampiric Tutored 5 times, but they're in top deck mode. And I think I'm not... at this point, I remember getting, like, pretty optimistic in spite of the absolutely janky nature of what I was, attempting to do. But, the Torpor Orb just made it so that this was the only option. Street Wraith number 2. Come on, 2 Flip Delvers. I hear that's pretty good. And yes, they don't have anything, so I get to draw my Force of Negation and get a little bit of sort of insurance against like Crop Rotation or whatever. Get in there twice. And They drop to 8. Sadly, we still have to give them 2 more draw steps. And here they play, if I remember, yeah, they play Valakut Exploration. And I think about this for a while, but I decide to cast Force of Negation just because, like, we could have saved that for crop rotation. Maybe that would have been more correct. But at this point, I was just like, it was such a fine. There were so fine margins that I was worried what this might end up doing to me. And in retrospect, it might have been incorrect to force this. So now we draw the last card of our deck, and our opponent obviously isn't going to die to these attacks. So luckily, it's Doomsday, which we then can cast again to buy ourselves another 5 draw steps. And also, if we need to, we'll be drawing into some blue cards. So we cast Doomsday again. We make Force of Negation. We only have 5 cards, so the pile is self-explanatory, at least in terms of content. And we put, I believe, Force of Negation on top. Okay, this is wrong. Pretty sure I didn't put Lotus Petal on top because that wouldn't make any sense at all. But nevertheless, they don't get there. They lose, and I sit there with, like, at this point, I had a feeling that something amazing might happen. I have to tell you, because this is like, I don't know. This feels like a 1 in 20 or 1 in 30, if not smaller, chance of success once Torpor Orb is in play, with the game being like it was. But we got there, so that was amazing. All right, let's check out round number 3. All right, so round number 3, we lost the die roll, and we have to mulligan this hand, so we do. Opponent also mulligans to 6. We mulligan this as well. You could keep it, but it's, yeah, decide not to. So we keep this. It's not amazing, but it has some game. We put, I think, Deep Analysis away, and probably Consider. Yeah. So our opponent shows us Rishadan Port and Vile, and I forced that because my reasoning being, I mean, obviously, if they just go like Plains Thalia, then that's we're gonna wish we had the force. But the fact that they lead on Port makes me think, A, they might not even have white mana, which means this Vile is what they need to play anything, and B, we're at a point where it's not unlikely that this game is going to go a while, and once Vile hits 2, it's really, it's a whole different game. This matchup is, I think, absolutely amazing for Doomsday, but it changes if the game ever gets to the point where they have an active Vile on 2, then it's a very different conversation, and it switches. I don't want to put percentages on it, but the win rate drops sort of for us, so quite significantly, I think. So that's why I did that. We draw Street Wraith, and I decide to go for it here and go looking for Doomsday. And we find Personal Tutor, which I think is pretty good. It's a little slow, but yeah. Okay, so they do have the planes. Fortunately for us, they don't have a follow-up play. They don't have Thalia or Spirit of the Labyrinth, or if they do, they decide not to use it in favor of like porting us. So we get Doomsday here. We're a little sad if they go Wasteland, but they fortunately do not. So I don't know what they kept. Oh no, this is game 1, so it's fair enough if they didn't keep anything sort of Doomsday related. All right, so we draw Doomsday. We were not able to win on the same turn with this this setup here. We needed another mana, or Consider in hand. So, but at this point, like against Death and Taxes with no creature in play, I feel very, very good. So I make a pile that has Thassa, and Underground Sea, a fetch land, Edge of Autumn, and Street Wraith. So This loses to like them getting another port or wasteland, which is I think is a little bit like that's a little sus to be honest. Looking at it now, but they have had like turns to draw like 2 turns to show us a wasteland, which they so it would have to be a top deck wasteland, and the second port is definitely a possibility, but they only have 3 left, and yeah, I I don't know if I could have I could probably I I mean I'm at least curious to work out if I could have made a better pile, but I'll think about that some more. Oh, I do decide that I didn't want to lose to a top deck wasteland, so I instead of the Street Wraith, I go for a Petal here. Ah, you see. All right. I think this means passing twice, and ooh, look at that. They have the second port. So I think we just have to let this happen because we're going to be passing again. So play the Tarn here. I think if Death and Taxes wanted to be proactive here, if they had the Wasteland here, they would also waste the Tarn. I'm not confident it would have changed anything, but I think sometimes like using effects on a fetch land post Doomsday can make a lot of sense because most likely the Doomsday player put the fetch land with a land in the pile, and that can sort of mess things up. Maybe it's not it's not amazing, but it's something to do. So here I think we no okay we wait 1 more turn. Yeah, I guess so. Oh, never mind. No, we don't. There was just no reason to like cycle in response to port. So here, yeah, we get the win, and we're 1 game up. Sweet. All right, so round number 3, game 2. We board in 4 Pact of Negation and Massacre, and we board out the 2 Thoughtseize and 3 Daze, I think. Being on the draw, Daze is less amazing. So this gives us a Fawn and a Brainstorm, but we can keep this. The only reason to keep this is because it has Fawn, and the other reason that we want Fawn is because the play they have that gets us is turn 1 Deafening Silence. But if we then actually play this out, we would be stuck with a hand of 5 lands, so that's just obviously never going to be an option. We keep this. This is like pretty sweet. They also mulligan to 6. I don't think we bought him. Yeah, we bought him a Force. And they do, if I recall correctly, have... Oh, no, they have Vile. I think about this a lot, and then I let it resolve. But I am worried about this. But because we have Doomsday, I think there's a fair chance we get to put Doomsday on the stack before Vile ticks to 2. And before it becomes like an issue. And we go digging for Exhilaration, and I think I shuffle this, I believe. And then we draw an annoying Volcanic Island, and this is suddenly looking a little less sort of sturdy because now they have they have the Vial. So, and do they also have some way to tax my mana? Okay, they don't. They have Thalia here, and we force Thalia, pitching Ponder because we want Brainstorm to shuffle away this Volcanic Island with the fetch land. But we can also just, get Dark Ritual. And I can't remember if I went for this, because this is a kill, but it's not if they have Mindbreak Trap or Surgical Extraction. So I'm pretty sure I would be conservative here and make a pass the turn pile, even though that it's annoying because they have Vile at 1, which it will take up to 2 now, and 2 means all sorts of stuff might come into play. But all right, let's see here. We make Thassa, Massacre. I'm pretty sure I ended up not putting Massacre in, but I can't remember. Okay, never mind. So I did put Massacre in there. Okay, so we can Brainstorm now. So a new heuristics I've kind of been sort of indoctrinating into myself is just always think like counting draws. It's pretty simple, but so what you want to make sure you have an overview of how many times you're going to have to pass a turn and what cards in your pile are drawing you cards. So here we can say we need at any point in time you have to think, okay, how many cards do I need to draw to win? And it's usually 5. So you want to see here, okay, Brainstorm can draw me 1 card. My draw step can draw me another card, and then these 3 cyclers can draw me the rest. So this means I'm passing the turn once. So we put Thassa on the bottom, then Massacre, and then the cyclers. And I decide to not Brainstorm right away. I think I need to Brainstorm before they put Vial on too, right? Yeah, okay, so I decide to Brainstorm here. And just put back land and edge. Because we had the second land. And we have to again cycle here before they get to be able to flash in an uncounterable Spirit of the Labyrinth. We have to cycle and draw as many cards. We don't want to draw with the edge yet, because if they have like Wasteland, I think I think I should have done that though. I think I didn't do it because I didn't want to. Yeah, no, never mind. We can't, because then if they have Wasteland, we just lose. So that's right, or Port. Okay, so this was an interesting one. I hadn't seen that before, but it doesn't really have text versus us. So just a 2/2 beater. Okay, so we draw a Massacre, and I remember thinking, okay, so if they have Spirit and I don't do anything here, then I'm just dead. I have 5 life. I'm dead to the beats. So if they have Spirit, that was then it sucks, because then I'm going to lose a land here, and looks like they do. Okay, so they have Spirit. We get to Massacre it. And I decide not to play out my second land because that would give them total information and it won't change anything for me. And this way, they might think that I have like Thassa in hand and a Petal on top. So they might like favor getting something like a Petal, like something to kill the Petal, like a Revoker or something else. And okay, so they get Recruiter, and the only thing I was really worried about was a Flicker Wisp coming out of the vial, so they could flicker my land on the end of their turn. But seeing as they do this, it doesn't matter. They get Canonist, which is not going to matter. They don't have the second or like the Wasteland report, so we're golden. In spite of a little bit of a wonky pile that probably could have been more elegant. But we got there. Sweet. So at this point, 3-0 in the event, feeling like that's pretty sweet, and sort of always like it always is amazing to just as long as you keep the 0 there. So yeah, very happy at this point. Have also like felt like it was a pretty rough start getting the Jeskai Ragavan deck, but since then 2 good matchups, so can't complain. All right, let's check out round number 4. All right, round number 4. We lose the die roll, and our opponent reveals Yurion. So I'm thinking, okay, if this is Death and Taxes, I'm not going to complain about that. I think I have to mulligan this though, and yeah, again, get a no-lander, so I have to go down to 5. Keep begrudgingly keep this. It's not great. Opponent kept 7. So this is one way to lose against Death and Taxes. They have Vial, and this is like, now we basically want Ponder to find Doomsday right now, because that way we can get to Doomsday on turn 2. we don't find Doomsday, so we have to pass. And we play out this Petal in case they go Thalia next turn. I think maybe I should have played out LED too. Okay, so they have Spirit of the Labyrinth. We can Daze that luckily though. Like Spirit of the Labyrinth here, that's lights out. Okay, so we cycle a Street Wraith. Then draw Thassa, which is just terrible. And decide to pass. I think I maybe would have cycled the other one as well. Okay, so they get to Recruiter for a 2-drop and have Vial on 2, which is just like, that's big game. So they get Spirit of Labyrinth, and it's pretty much over here at this point. I'm not going to get through this. So I cycle in response, get Brainstorm, and then Brainstorm in response. And we do find the Doomsday, but the problem is they're going to be beating for 4 a turn. So, and we have to fetch down to 14. We take 4 from them, and that we could win, but it's not looking amazing. LED basically doesn't work with a Spirit of Labyrinth in play. So you take this up to 3. So the problem is the way we win here is we pass the turn once, but we're gonna be on 5 life, and they can beat us for 4, and they have a Vial on 3, which means if they have anything to Vial in, like any creature that can deal 1 point of damage, we're out. So they tap their mana, then untap here, making me suspicious. But I can't really do anything. Like there's one way to go here. Because of the nature of Spirit Labyrinth, we have to like pass a turn. The good thing is we have Consider, which lets us get 2 cards into the deck on their turn at instant speed. Spirit of Labyrinth lets you draw 1 card per turn. So why am I putting in Thoughtseize and Street Wraith here? Oh yeah, never mind. It's because I'm not getting to those cards. I'm like, it's just 2 blanks. So we put blank on the bottom, and then like Pact of Negation, Personal Tutor, Edge, I think. So this way we get to Consider on their turn, put I think Personal Tutor in the graveyard, draw Edge, and then untap, draw Pact of Negation, and then go Thassa Pact. But again, this means that they can't have anything to put in through the vial. So this would have worked if they didn't have anything, but as you see, sadly, they do have something. They have a flash creature that I didn't know either. And this means we're dead. So we lost game 1. Alright, so game number 2, we get this hand, which is a keep, I would say. They mulligan to 6. I think we ponder here. And I think I shuffle and then get a Brainstorm, yeah. So they have turn 1 Vial. We let that resolve, which is a bit dangerous, but we're so close here. Yeah, but not looking great. So, but at the same time, if we can dodge a Wasteland or something, or Port, then we should be pretty golden. But we can't though, so they have Port. So now it's getting awkward because now their Vial is getting live. And they Vial in something, and I cycle Street Wraith because I panically thought they had Vial on 2, but I got ahead of myself here. So we luck out here in that they tap out to cast a Recruiter of the Guard, which we can then we get to Daze it, but also we now get to cast Doomsday next turn. And that Recruiter would have gotten Spirit of the Labyrinth, which would have, crushed us, most likely. Okay, so we have we have like we have it all, I want to say. Because we both have Thassa already, so that's one free slot in the pact, in the pile, I mean. And we have a pact already in hand and a Daze. So I consider putting Massacre in here, but I think I might not have done that, but I don't remember. So let's see. Okay, I really had a lot of change of heart here. Okay. So I didn't see what I put there at the bottom. Again, no, I think Magic Online is messing up here. Because they have a 2-drop. I cycle in response just because I kind of have to. Draw Street Wraith, cycle Street Wraith, draw Petal. Interesting. Yeah, okay, so I think what I I drew a brainstorm here. I think I'm gonna scratch this recording and alright. Alright, let's see here. So what pile did I make? I honestly can't remember. Alright, so at this point I've chosen my 5 cards and I put Street Wraith on the bottom. Yeah, no. So I've attempted this a number of times, and Magic Online is not letting me through the replay. The replay function, it's not showing the pile correctly because obviously I'm not putting Lotus Petal on top with Volcanic Island underneath. So I do apologize, but looks like this isn't going to show the replay as it happened. So what I did was I put consider here, and then I think I considered. So I wonder if this is gonna happen. Yeah, so I sacked the blue, the petal for blue, but right now in my hand I have this petal that Magic Online for some reason has me drawing. But anyways, we got there. We didn't win this turn, but we won on the following turn, and I will hopefully get to show you the real pile in game number 3. All right. All right. So game number 3, still 3-0 at this point. Hoping to get there, and we get this. This just like the best hand possible, almost anyways, because it has. Not only does it have the turn 1 Doomsday, we could go for a clean win on turn 1, but that would play into something like Mindbreak Trap. But we need to get to our turn, and we even have the Force of Negation for Deafening Silence, which is why we brought it in. An opponent keeps 7. So this actually has the protection for that. So yeah, let's have a look. And I do believe they actually did have Deafening Silence. Yes, please, let's Force of Negation that. So this really just, I drew it incredibly hot here. I'm pretty sure I decided not to make a win on the spot pile because I did want to play around stuff like surgical extraction or yeah, the aforementioned what do you call it, Mindbreak Trap. So having what I have in my hand, it feels like it's almost impossible to lose here. What the way we could lose is for them to be staying on like 3 wastelands or something. So, and even then we have the petal, so it should be okay. But just something to like. I don't think there's any 2-drop they could have that would sort of get us. So we make this pile, and I put Cavern in there. I'm not sure exactly why I did that, because I'm not worried about stuff that counters my Thassa. Like, if we're putting in an underground sea, then there's this odd world where they like Wasteland, Underground Sea, and Surgical it. But we could also just have put Volcanic Island in there to play around that. So, yeah. There's not really a reason not to. Not a good one that I can come up with anyways, so sure, that's fine. So we put, again here, Magic Online is bugging us out because I think it put Edge of Autumn on the bottom, which just not so frustrating. Wish I could have. It's okay, so they have Wasteland. So we cycle, and they choose Pithing Needle. Yeah, and I remember this. So I cycle all my wraiths to not like lose to them naming Pithing Needle, and then the next two cards down, I do believe, were, I'm not sure if Magic Online stacked this correctly, but I had Cavern on the bottom, and then Edge of Autumn, and like, so they tanked on this for a long time, and I think they were looking at my exile pile to see what to name, and I think they were really considering naming a fetch land because that was what the last two cards in my pile were in game two where I got them. And that's also where I really felt rewarded for my fetch land sort of constellation that I believe I ran 3 Tarn, 3 Misty, 2 Flooded Strand, and 1 Bloodstained Mire, or it might have been 2 Mires, 1 Strand, I don't remember. Because it just meant that you couldn't sort of readily see, like, if you play, say, 8 fetches and you have 4 and 4, it's pretty obvious if there was 4 and 3 in the pile or in the exile zone. But anyways, eventually they figured out that they should name Edge of Autumn, which they did. It has me what considering here? No. Yeah. Okay, so they name Edge of Autumn. I tell them well played. And this doesn't kill us, but it does mean that if they then on their following turn can do something to remove the Lotus Petal or switch it off, then we lose. Yeah. I didn't draw Cavern, I drew Edge of Autumn. Because that's how I drew it up. So Cavern was my last card. So fortunately for us, they didn't play anything that mattered and we got to win. I wonder if it'll show me drawing Edge of Autumn here. Like if I had played it like this, it wouldn't make sense obviously to put Edge of Autumn on the bottom, but if I had and had drawn Cavern, I don't know that I play Thassa because if they have Solitude then we're just dead. But okay, so that was round 4, and 4-0, which is obviously super sweet, and I was really... Alright, so for round number 5, I am paired up against Legacy All-Star Brian Kowal. If you haven't checked out his YouTube channel, it's Bosch and Roll, like his username here. And he churns out a lot of cool Legacy content. I definitely recommend checking that out. And knowing a bit about Brian, I would felt fairly confident he was on some sort of blue-white X sort of control deck. And I won the die roll, so that was cool. And I get a crushing, amazing hand. I think with this deck, basically any hand that lets you turn early turn Doomsday with protection. It's just, yeah, no, it's kind of self-explanatory. Like, if I had had like a Daze instead of Thoughtseize, I would still be equally as thrilled because I kind of expected what I have a pretty good idea about what I'm up against. But if it was an unknown opponent, then this is even more perfect because you get to see their hand and still are able to go turn 1 Doomsday. Because I do think that one of the I won't say weaknesses, but just sort of curiosities about this deck is like it's the turn 1 frequency for me. It like you don't always want to jam Doomsday, even if you have turn 1 with protection, because if you don't know what you're up against, you're just like completely fishing in the dark and you don't know what to play around. And building a pile in the dark with only 1 land, basically you'll have to expend a lot of your hand. You don't know if your opponent has a wasteland, then certain piles will just leave you dead in the water, and if your opponent has like the capability of drawing into counter spells, then that's something else, blah, blah, blah. So a lot of the time you want to wait at least until you see what your opponent's up to. But here, because we have a Thoughtseize, it's just so good. So Bosch and roll mulligans to 6. I get Underground Sea here and am a little sort of upset to see the Wasteland, but still fairly happy to look into this hand, and I can only imagine Brian Cole being somewhat frustrated at losing his Brainstorm here, because that leaves 4 lands and a Jace, which is pretty rough. But he is going to be able to Wasteland me next turn, so that's something. But obviously, we make the Doomsday here. And let's see if I can remember which pile I make. And see if Magic Online recreates that. So, Cavern, Thassa, yeah, that seems like something I'd do. We want a Pact because there's a pretty big chance that Brian has access to either like Dress Down or Endurance. Though right now there's only one, like, there's no green card in his hand, so Endurance will need some help. So we can feel pretty confident that Brian's going to like waste us. So I go for this somewhat slow pile, but it has a Pact of Negation. I don't think there's a way I get to have both protection and speed things up. We should put Underground Sea on the bottom. Let's see if Magic Online does that for us. It does. Amazing. And then the Thassa, sure. Pact of Negation, Cavern and Tarn. I'm not going to say I'm completely certain that's how it went. But yeah, let's see here. And we're also then faced with the interesting dilemma that we can draw the Tarn, and then we can cast Brainstorm to speed things up by a turn, which I'm pretty sure we end up doing, but we have to wait until they make their next land drop and commit themselves to a non-wasteland land drop, just because otherwise we lose. Oh wait, I just spew it here. I think I'm supposed to wait there. I guess just cross our fingers. I'm feeling pretty sure he doesn't have like 4 wastelands, but I still think I probably should have waited, to be honest. But okay, he makes a drop. We were able to go off. Wow, this is actually a little bit on the loose side here. Yeah, but in either case, we put Thassa into play. Brian has no white mana. To cast Source of Plowshares, so no realistic removal. And like Endurance, which is the only thing that could realistically come into play here, I think gets for Pact of Negation. So it doesn't really matter that we're one card from getting to the bottom of the pile. And so we win. Alright, so game number 2 on the draw. My sideboarding against this type of deck is to bring in Sheldog Isle and Emrakul, and to bring in the 3 Red Blasts and the 2 extra Duresses, and I typically shave something like 2 Personal Tutor, the LED, the Deep Analysis, and a couple of Cyclers. And because the thing is, after sideboard, we can't reliably ever just gung-ho Thassa onto the stack while being hellbent, which is basically what LED usually is all about, because the risks of them having like say endurance is just too high, or like if they have open mana, then dress down. So that's why, you know, with no LED, deep analysis is kind of not a thing. So let's see, I don't remember how my starting hand was, but having the Emrakul in the opener. Oh yeah, and I brought in Massacre to like snipe a Meddling Mage or an Aethersworn Canonist. So having the Emrakul is not ideal, and no cantrips, no Doomsday, so I think this is a mulligan. And I get a somewhat unspectacular hand, but I do keep it and send back the Edge of Autumn, which is probably the weakest card here. And let's see how we do. Being up against this type of deck is usually pretty good for Doomsday, but I will say that them having access to Wasteland is like pulls it further towards them. So we ponder here, and I think we shuffle. We do. We still draw ponder. The old Magic Online shuffle bug. I don't know. All right. So their second turn, and they brainstorm. So that's good. Good that they didn't like, I guess, play a Sylvan Library or something. That would have been like pretty scary. So I think I brainstorm here, and we find Doomsday. Unfortunately, all we have for protection is Daze, and I wouldn't expect my opponent to ever tap out versus the Daze combo deck. So we fetch Underground Sea here because we have the Misty to find like Volcanic if we do need it at some point. These are great cards, but they don't, like, there's no permission. I think maybe I should have kept though, just because like there was a like the Drawn to Ponder or the Consider, because I think either is probably better than a random card. But I did shuffle and I got a Volcanic Island, so a little bit of a punishment there. So they fetch Tundra, which means Massacre is on, and they play Baleful Strix. So I think like having Baleful Strix, I don't know. At least when I saw Baleful Strix, I was kind of pleased. I think that is one of the least like scary things that can happen for 2 mana on my opponent's side. And we find Force of Will. And I think I just jam here. And opponent lets it resolve. And so I make a pile that has Emrakul and Shelter Isle and a Pyroblast. No, Red Blast, I think. Yeah, I corrected it. Thassa and Cavern. So this is a pretty sweet pile. I think it plays around a lot of stuff. It does kind of bank on your opponent not having like a Wasteland. It's also not great if they have Karakas, but it's not as bad. So like with Wasteland, Sheldar Isle still kind of just draws a card basically, and lets you reorder the remaining 3 cards of your library if you need to. A Karakas, Sheldar Isle both draws a card in that sense, but it also lets you time walk, so essentially it draws you 2 cards over the course of a couple of turns. So it's not terrible, but it's not obviously ideal. And then we have like Red Blast to take something like Teferi or whatever it might be, and then Cavern and Thassa as the auxiliary sort of win condition here. The way I would build this sort of pile would be just like basically it doesn't for me matter that much in which order Cavern, Reb, and Thassa are placed. You should probably think about it though, but unless you get like Fate Sealed or Dashed Ragavan, you will have agency over the, like, you'll get a second shot at this. But let's see here. I put Cavern on the bottom, then Thassa, then Red Blast. I think that's probably the way to go. And we pass the turn on a solid 9 life with Force of Will and Massacre in our hand. So that's pretty decent. Opponent ponders and they shuffle, so that's always a good sign. There's a Delta. In come the Strix. No other plays, right? Our opponent has 6 cards in hand. Alright, so we hide away the Emrakul, and we make it so that we put basically the cards in the same order. So Red Blast goes first. Underneath that we put Thassa and then Cavern. So they had the Karakas, which is obviously unfortunate for us, and means that our sort of our win condition is blunted a bit. Now we have to win with Thassa, which means like endurance beats us if we can't stop it. So we have to basically rely on this Force of Will to stop endurance. So we can just draw. Fortunately, we're not facing any pressure, so we can, so at least with the game being as it is, we can just wait. Obviously, giving our opponents extra draws is not great, but I don't think that, well, there really isn't anything else to do. Okay, so they cast Uru, which is fair, but it does, them being tapped, like any land that they have to tap is relevant, especially since, you know, stuff like hard cast, Force of Will, if they play Flusterstorm, I don't know, just like it just kind of matters. So I forgot to say this, but I just decided to wait on the Emrakul until I get to this point, because there's just no real reason to not do that, I think. I'm not expecting my opponents to tap their Karakas, obviously, but there was no reason to just do it ahead of time since I knew I needed to get all of my cards in hand. That's also why I was kind of pleased that they tapped out on the turn that they did. So we cast Emrakul, and we Time Walk, and we draw the Cavern of Souls on our new draw step. So we attack with them, or we try to go to the attack. Opponent correctly bounces Emrakul. And then we're still in our main phase. We make Cavern, and I think this is like a really interesting play, and I would actually love to know what was in Brian's hand, because so we decide to put Thassa on the stack. We basically have to. We're 0 cards in deck. In response, I believe it was. Maybe it does. No, okay, yeah. So in response, so I thought maybe an endurance was being hard cast here, but no. So opponent casts Veil of Summer. So here's the deal. I think I thought about this for a while during the actual game. I thought, like, so obviously if I force this, or rather if I don't force this, then my Force of Will is just a dead card. But the mana they have left open means if they have like Dress Down, we can let Dress Down enter the battlefield, and then with the trigger on the stack, we can, like the draw a card trigger, we can Red Blast it. Now, obviously, I'm thinking, okay, so they have 4 cards in hand. They could have like a number of things. The one sort of Joker aspect of this, which was the reason I didn't want to Force of Will this, was if they have exactly Dress Down and Endurance, and that's their interaction, then like if I Force of Will this Veil of Summer, then I lose the game, because I then don't have a force for the endurance for the Dress Down, which means I have to. It doesn't matter, but the thing, I have to spew use my Red Blast on the Dress Down, and that puts, together with Force of Will, 3 cards in the deck. So when Endurance then enters the battlefield, I get a deck that is now 3 cards big. Whereas if I just let Veil resolve and then hope that they don't have like a pitch counter as well, then I beat Dress Down and Endurance that way, because I let Dress Down interplay. I Red Blasted before they draw a card. My graveyard is now Doomsday Red Blast, and then if all they have is Endurance, then Endurance just means that my deck becomes a deck of 2 cards, and then Thassa enters the battlefield, and there you go. Alright, so eventually I let Veil resolve, and opponent draws a card and just concedes. So I'm pretty curious as to the content of their 5-card hand, but yeah. So really stoked to take that one. So 5-0. Let's check out round number 6. All right. So for round number 6, we are on the draw, and our opponent reveals Yurion. So might be another Death and Taxes, and I decide to keep this hand. It's pretty good. Opponent mulligans down to 3 cards. I cannot remember having that happen to me in game 1. So I wonder if they knew we were on Doomsday. Being a Yurion deck, I'm not expecting, like, someone mulligans to 3 game 1, you kind of think it's Dredge or All Spells or Reanimator. But, you know, I'll take it. It was rather absurd, and I definitely felt pretty lucky. So, and they are a Plains deck, so there you go. I decide to cycle here to see if I hit something, and I do indeed hit something useful. So we get to just put Doomsday on top of our deck and pass the turn against the opponent at multi 3. And even if they wasteland us or port us, we have the Petal. So, but they play Thalia, and Daze just proving an all-star here. And I believe I just decide to go for the same turn win here, not expecting any shenanigans out of them on turn 1. So this is one of the standard piles. We even get to put Pact of Negation in the pile because we have Thassa in hand already. The pile needs Ideas Unbound and Lion's Eye Diamond and a Cycler, and we choose Street Wraith, and then a Petal, and then what would normally be Thassa, but is now Pact. And you put Petal and Pact on the bottom, and then the top 3 cards. The order doesn't matter. And cast Brainstorm, put back Thassa, and then Ideas Unbound on top. Play LED, and Magic Online Replay has me putting Ideas Unbound on the stack here. Okay, playback finished, exiting. That's interesting. So I'm going to try and run this over again. Alright, so Magic Online is not letting me finish this replay, but it also shows me having put back the wrong card. So that's awesome. But yeah, you'll have to imagine how this game ended. So I put LED in play, cycle Street Wraith to sack it for triple blue, draw Ideas Unbound, draw Thassa, Pact, and Petal. So, alright, on to game number 2. Alright, so game number 2 against Yurion, Death and Taxes. Our opponent mulligans. Well, I keep this hand, which is, it's like, it has the turn 1 interaction for Deafening Silence, like we saw before. Opponent mulligans down to 4. So this opponent has mulliganed to 3 in game 1 and now 4 in game 2. So I do kind of feel very bad for them. Looks like they keep their 4. And they have just Ursa Zargaf as their land drops. No turn 1 Deafening Silence. Draw another Force of Negation, so flooding out a little bit on those. Decide to cast Ponder here. And I don't think I like these cards. Although maybe actually Force of Will is good in case they have a turn 2 like Thalia or Spirit of the Labyrinth. So yeah, I do decide to draw that. So let's see. They are completely decimated in terms of those mulligans though. So, and they just pass. So no need to use the Force. We draw the Mire. And we fetch because we know what's on top. So might as well get a fresh card for consider. I think we put this in the graveyard. We draw another Mire, so not amazing, but it's not the worst either. So they can't make a construct here, so they get Pithing Needle and they name Street Wraith, and nothing really I can do to stop that. And then they have the Aether Vial. I consider in response, find a Brainstorm, which I very much want to draw. And I think we cast it here. And we hit Paydirt. And so I put back LED because I don't think there's any reason to jump the gun here. We are facing 0 pressure. And if they had something like Mindbreak Trap, then there's no reason to like use LED to get Hellbent and then lose to that. So I just decide to pass Doomsday here, saving my Bloodstained Mire in order to put a fetchable land in the pile, and then pass with like double force and like plenty of lands. So feel very, very safe here. So we put Volcanic in as the land we can fetch, just in case like we don't want them to wasteland us in Surgical Underground Sea if we had put Underground Sea in there. And they name Street Wraith with the Pithing Needle, so we take Edge of Autumn and of course Thassa. And then a Consider, which can sort of dig. Like the cool thing about Consider on versus Death and Taxes is that at instant speed it can sort of dig 2 cards deep on your opponent's turn through a Spirit of the Labyrinth, which is like quite nifty. I do believe once again that Magic Online is messing up the replay here because I don't think it makes any sense that I would put Consider as the second card from the bottom. So, oh, actually, no, I might have, because as we see here, I fetch. I suppose I decide I only need 1 force. So I want to dig a card in here. And look what happens. This was very unexpected. Archive Trap. So I feel pretty confident this only really has application versus Doomsday. And I find it quite interesting that the mono white deck is playing this blue trap and not the regularly played blue trap, the Mindbreak Trap. So this would have definitely like KO'd me, but fortunately I had Force of Will. So, and they also fortunately didn't have another one. So we get to draw Edge of Autumn and just pass the turn. And they put Vial on one. And they have a Spirit of the Labyrinth. And that means I need to edge on their turn if I want to draw a card, which I decide I do. I consider. I choose not to put Cavern of Souls in my graveyard. I draw it. And, well, it says playback finished, but alright, so I'm not sure exactly what is going on here because I couldn't cast Consider on my own turn to draw a card because of Spirit of the Labyrinth, and it says playback finished, so sadly, yet again, the replay function on the Magic Online client is sort of letting me down here, but it's like safe to say I won on this turn. At this point, I'm 6-0. At this point, it's also getting to the point where it's like I think it's past midnight while I was playing, so I'm getting like really tired and starting to reconsider my choices, but at the same time, obviously feeling ecstatic to be 6-0. All right, so round 7, I win the die roll and I get like turn 1 Doomsday with Force backup. This also just is the straight up turn 1 kill, and I looked up my opponent and saw that they had had results with burn. So after a while I considered that it's probably pretty likely that they were on burn, and that they wouldn't be able to interact with us. Alright, so let's see the pile I make. I went back and forth a bit, but I believe I ended up with the same turn win pile. Or did I? Because this doesn't do that at all. Yeah, so I make the Consider pile, and this is the pile. This is where you get where having Consider lets you win with 0 cards in the deck, where before, when you were in the spot that I'm in, you would have cards left in the deck. So basically, you make the pile Petal on top, and then you make Thassa the bottom card. Then you Wraith into Petal, cast Brainstorm, drawing Consider LED and another Wraith. And you put back the blank in your hand, which is Force of Will here, and then Consider. Then you play Diamond, Wraith into Consider, sack Diamond. For blue, with 1 blue, you cast Consider, binning the Force of Will, and drawing Thassa, and you have 2 floating. So pile is not working correctly because it just showed us putting Consider as the bottom card and drawing LED and then Thassa. So you're just gonna have to take my word for it here. This is not obviously what happened. And opponent did nothing, and we took game 1. So based on my assumptions and game 1, I decided to board against the deck like it was burn, which meant I didn't bring in Force of Negation because I don't like Force of Negation. It doesn't counter Eidolon or the new Eidolon as they are creatures. And I get this hand, and would you look at this? If my opponent was indeed on burn, this would beat anything except Mindbreak Trap, or I guess red mana with Blast. So I keep this feeling very good, only to find that my opponent is not on burn. So let it be a lesson for people looking up other people's results and making assumptions based upon them. Turns out my opponent is on Oops All Spells, and they have the turn 1 kill here. They summon Summoner's Pact for an Elvish Spirit Guide, which they exile, and together with another Spirit Guide, they cast the Balustrade Spy. He enters the battlefield and flips over the entire deck. They hit all 4 Narcomoebas. They have just 1 card in hand, and it's not Thassa. Thassa is here somewhere. There she is. So we got turn 1'd. We turn 1 them, and then they turn 1 us. So this is definitely, that side of Legacy. and means we have to sort of switch things up for game number 3 in terms of our sideboard. So bring in the Force of Negations. I can't remember exactly what I pulled out. And this is just an obscenely good hand. So we get to like cast Dark Ritual and then another Dark Ritual, and then we can both Duress and Doomsday, and we even get to make the top of our deck like a Force of Will or another discard spell. No complaints here. They mulligan to 6 and keep. And so we Duress them here, I think. Yeah, and they show us this hand, which is the flip land and a Pact and a Chrome Mox, and they have one of their combo creatures, but no way to make black mana right now. And I end up taking the Chrome Mox and going for Doomsday. Make a pilot actually has I choose to get Thoughtseize over Force and be sort of proactive that way. So make this pile, which basically means we Thoughtseize them now. Then we draw Petal on our next turn, and we just Ideas Unbound and win. The only sort of risk being if they actually draw... Well, no, see, the thing is they can't draw both the Thoughtseize and a way to make black mana next turn. So this should be fairly safe. I decided to get a land here over the Petal. I'm not sure exactly why, but so let's see here. Petal onto the bottom, then Thassa, then land, then Thoughtseize. And we Thoughtseize them, and we take the Undercity Informer. So that leaves them with a hand of Simian Spirit Guide, Pact, Swarm, and the green land. And they play their Swarm. That's really, I think, their only play. And we draw the deck. And they make the Royale with Cheese play here, and Pact the Thassa. They are going to go down in a blaze of glory, which they do, and we have to discard, which we can't. And we win because they can't pay for their Pact. So that was 7-0, getting towards like 1 or 2 p.m. here, or a.m. I can't remember. So I was really baked at this point, but also obviously stoked. So let's get on to round number 8. All right, so for round number 8, we are on the play and up against unknown opponent and get just another really good hand. As you'll probably agree with me, my deck was really cooperating throughout this tournament, so no complaints there. And I decide, I think, to Thoughtseize them on turn 1 rather than having to like both Thoughtseize and then Dark Ritual Doomsday on turn 2 in case it's like a Daze deck or something. But I get punished here because I'm looking at this. So they have kept a little bit of an interesting hand here with no way to get a creature into the graveyard and no animation effect. Which is not completely true. Obviously, they can draw with Faithless Looting and discard. So if they were to draw a creature, or if they could draw a creature, they could unmask themselves, but no immediate way anyways. So I end up taking the Faithless Looting after some deliberation, and sadly this means opponent, who's also at this point I think 7-0, is obviously not a bad player, so they're not going to discard Deep Analysis no matter how much I would want them to. They exiled the Dark Ritual. So I get to Brainstorm here, and I find a Daze, which is it's decent. I put back LED and decide to save the Brainstorm that I also drew because I feel pretty sure that I'm getting unmasked here. They unmask, exiling, unmask. So now they have 2 cards we don't know about, and they're getting close to being able to flashback Faithless Looting. They decide to take the Daze, which makes sense. We get Brainstorm and we fetch to clear the LED, and not amazing. We put back Deep Analysis. I think that card is actually, in my mind, a little bit up for debate. No one is really discussing whether or not it should be in the deck, and it does offer up lines, at least in particular one line with Consider. That is the reason it's there for, but I do feel it's kind of annoying to draw. But anyways, that's a debate for another time. Put back Deep Analysis, put back a Dark Ritual, Ponder to shuffle, but no, I actually find Doomsday. So I decide to put Doomsday second from the top and draw the second Dark Ritual, so in case they have like another discard spell, we're still sort of set. And they just do nothing in pass, and that means we get to win here, because Reanimator, at least traditionally, doesn't play anything game one. I am worried, because of the white mana, that they might have like a silence effect, but I decide not to make my choices based on that. So we make this pile which has Pact, and so we cycle. I think what we could do here. I'm curious to see if I actually did that. I don't remember, but you can put Pact as the top card. Oh no, never mind. Never mind. We would need another blue mana for what I'm thinking. So yeah, this is like, if they have silence, they can get us here. So we just need to cycle into a petal, cast the Ideas Unbound in our hand, but that only gets us to, yeah, that doesn't draw the entire deck. So we would need a second cycler in place of this Pact of Negation. We can't get to have like an empty library and protection in hand. At least I wasn't able to do that. So I guess I realized that. Oh, I decided to put Doomsday in case something goes wrong, in case they have the silence. Yeah, I actually like that a lot. So yet again, we're getting screwed over by Magic Online here, because it showed me putting Thassa beneath Doomsday, which doesn't make sense. Yeah, so you'll have to just imagine that Doomsday was Thassa. Yeah, so so we won game one, and for the sideboard, just the regular stuff, like in with 4 Pact of Negation, in with 2 Duress. I believe I cut Pact. Sorry, in with 4 Force of Negation, and I believe I cut the Pact. I probably cut Volcanic Island, maybe a Cycler, maybe a Daze, or Personal Tutor on the draw. I can't remember. All right, I hope it's not too terrible to watch, even though the replay function is sort of failing us here. At least it seems to only fail when we get to the Doomsday piles. And while that is obviously a pretty sort of clutch aspect of playing this deck, it's not always. Sometimes we do get to watch the actual piles, and the game state, sort of the game leading up to that point in time, seems to be sort of unaffected. But yeah, so game number 2 against Reanimator, up game 1. I think it's a really tough matchup, to be honest. Black Red Reanimator. I won't go so far as to really say that I feel confident about who's favored, but it definitely is really, like, it's dangerous. It's a very scary deck. So I decided not to keep that hand, even though it had like reasonable cards, because it didn't have turn 1 interaction. This doesn't either, but at least it has like 2 discard spells. So if we don't get turn 1, and then we sadly see that they have Chancellor of the Annex revealed, so our turn 1 discard isn't going to work. But I still think this probably ends up playing a bit into my favor, because our opponent has kept one of those types of Reanimator hands where they pass turn 1 in order to get to turn 2 and then discard naturally. So while that means we are unable to stop them because of the Chancellor from getting to discard a creature, at least we can discard 2 things on turn 2. And I decided to just burn my Dark Ritual in order to be able to get burned through the Chancellor. On second thought, though, watching it now, I think I should not have done that, because in case I actually drew a 3rd discard spell, it would have been better to just play a land on turn 2, cast Dark Ritual, pay for the land. That would still net us 1 extra mana, but it's probably unlikely to matter. So they go to their discard spell, they discard Chancellor, so that's already a little bit of a sort of bonus that it's Chancellor and not the Gristlebrand. Though a Resolve Chancellor is still pretty scary. So they have 2 reanimation spells, so it's pretty good that we have the Thoughtseize as well. So we can take both of those. The problem is they can hard cast. Oh no, never mind. They can't. They have Grief though, so they can discard us if they want to next turn. But yeah, we only have one sort of course of action here, which is to discard their 2 combo pieces and leave them with a hand of Dark Ritual, 2 lands of Grief, and the Archon of Cruelty. So, and they play a Badlands, which is not one of the lands in their hand, so we know still have perfect information. And they decide not to Grief, which is interesting. So we Brainstorm here and kind of it's kind of a dud. So we put back a couple of lands, play out the Strand. And yeah, I remember I sided out 1 Daze, so we are on 3 Daze in the deck, which is going to come up momentarily. So they grief us here, exiling their Dark Ritual, and they decide to take Daze. And they play their Scrubland. Their hand is Archon, Delta, and one Unknown. And their Unknown, sadly, is an enemy dead. And this is where we just get, like, smiled upon from the magic gods, because look what happens here. I fetch and I cycle Street Wraith, and the only thing I can hit is one of my remaining 2 Dazes. Hitting a Force of Will doesn't do it, Force of Negation doesn't do it, and that's kind of it. So we cycle Street Wraith, and like the no good, lucky son of a Gunderson we are, we just hit the Daze. And I can't help but feel really guilty. And I decided to pick up a land here in case we draw Brainstorm, because we don't need all those lands. And then we draw Brainstorm, which is just like, you can't draw this up. And we fetch because we know what's coming from the Ponder. We shuffle and hit Personal Tutor. So, I mean, if this had been a paper game, I'm not sure I would have been able to sort of maintain eye contact with my opponent. I would just feel so guilty for what just happened. But our opponent also knows how a thing or two about top decking. They get another enemy dead. So we can put Doomsday on the stack here and pay for, like, we have exact mana to cast Doomsday. But we're going to drop to 6 life, and we have to pass the turn, obviously. An opponent is going to swing for 4, which means our Street Wraiths are offline. So this was a very tricky pile, I thought. And the pile we end up making is Ideas Unbound, Lion's Eye Diamond, a land, Edge of Autumn, and Thassa. And so the plan is that we draw Ideas Unbound, we tap, we have to pay 3 mana to cast it. We draw a land, Lion's Eye Diamond, and Edge. And then we can play the land, pay 1 mana to cast LED, and we have Exactsies. So opponent, fortunately, can't really do anything meaningful because we know that one of their last 2 cards is Archon. So I guess they could, theoretically, they could like have drawn a Faithless Looting and then loot the Archon into the graveyard and like animate it, and we would lose then. That's actually what could have happened, but fortunately it didn't. So we just take 4, drop to 2, pay the mana for Ideas Unbound, pay the tax for the Chancellor, and yeah, we just exactly get there. So that was like crazy. And we are now 8-0, so just awesome. And it's on to, oh wait, was this round 8 or 9? I forget. But we're on to the next round regardless. Pick up here round number 9 on the draw, and yet again our opponent reveals Yurion, and this is a decent enough hand. It's sort of nondescript. We don't like having Thassa, but we have Brainstorm to shuffle her away. Yet it must have been pretty late at this point because I decided to throw that away. I guess like if like I'm assuming here I'm up against Death and Taxes, and you do kind of want the early Doomsday, and we get this hand which has both Doomsday and Dark Ritual, and we just need a black mana source. So, and then we're ready to rock and roll. And they go Karakas into Mother of Runes. So, and we just luck sack into the top deck the black mana and make Doomsday here. And now we have to respect the fact that they can go turn to Spirit of the Labyrinth. We also have to plan for them being able to take out our lands. So that's kind of 2 different things that you're focusing on. But if they have the turn 2 Spirit, they're going to beat us. We're going to drop to 10. They're going to beat us down to 9 with Mother. We draw fetch land. That'll take us to 8. They attack with Spirit and Mom, that takes us to 4. We play another fetch land that takes us to 3, and then we have to pass so we die. So that's not going to work. I mean, yeah, so basically if they have this, if I make this pile, I actually can't remember if I ended up doing it. Okay, so I think better of it. Yeah, that doesn't work either. We don't want 2 fetches and only 1 fetchable land. Okay, so I decide on this instead. So with the cyclers, we can cycle on their turn, even if they have spirit. And we have an extra land in our hand, so we can play around Wasteland somewhat. I guess that's not what I do. Jeez. Okay. Consider is also nifty. As I explained earlier, it lets us like dig 2 cards deep on our opponent's turn. That does look like is what I ended up doing. So I suppose Underground Sea, I always put that like the fetchable land on the bottom. And then the fetch land. And then Thassa, and then Edge and Consider. So I plan on like binning Edge with Consider. But looks like they... Okay, so yeah, no. They have Wasteland, but they also have Spirit. Bring the beats. But this way, we get to win the race, so to speak. So obviously, now we lose if they have another Wasteland in hand, but that's just how it goes. You can't beat everything. Another port would, or like a port would also do it. So it is pretty... It's certainly not unlikely that they could have something like that, but fortunately they don't. They play Thalia. We respond with Consider. Bin the Edge, draw the Thassa, and then the next 2 cards is Fetch Land and another Underground Sea. And yeah, fortunately Thalia doesn't really matter versus Thassa. So they get to Wasteland this, so... Alright, cool. Alright, so before we start game number 2, I just want to say thanks a lot for watching so far. If you like what you see, please subscribe and click the like button. And yeah, let's get on with the round. On the draw for game number 2, playing for the 9-0, and we get a... This is a turn 1 Doomsday, unless they have Deafening Silence, so obviously I'm not going to pass on this. If they do have Deafening Silence, it's a turn 2 Doomsday. No, actually, no. Yeah, no, it is. It is. We just go turn 1, fetch land, Petal, and then turn 2, fetch land, Doomsday. And they do have the Deafening Silence, so fair play. We draw Dark Ritual, which is now sort of a completely dead card. We have no way to remove Deafening Silence once it's in play. Have to hope it's not Thalia here. Okay, and it's not. It's Vile. Pact of Negation is, I suppose, not the worst, but it's also unlikely that it has any more targets now that Deafening Silence is in play. Okay, so we cast Doomsday here. We have 2 lands and a Petal, so feeling pretty good. And they didn't have Spirit of Labyrinth last turn, or they would definitely have bladed over Aether Vial. So I consider putting Massacre in the pile, but I think, yeah, we might as well do that as we already have Thassa in hand. But I think it's not terrible to make like 4 Cyclers and Massacre. But I decide to, instead of putting 4 Cyclers, I decide to save 1 life and put a Tarn and a Volcanic instead. So like fetch land actually is kind of like the same as the Street Wraith in this spot. except it just costs 1 life instead of 2. So they surgical, and it doesn't really matter, seeing as Thassa's in hand, I think. We can also consider on our own turn and cast Thassa, as Deafening Silence doesn't count creatures. So they have the port. We consider in response. Put Street Wraith into the graveyard and draw Scalding Tarn. Remember now the deck has been shuffled. So the Scalding Tarn was a random draw. We could have drawn the Underground Sea, or like I can't remember if it's a Sea or Volk we put in. So that was definitely a bit fortunate. Because now we just get to win. We can play the Tarn. We can sack a land, but we fortunately remember not to do that, so we have to fetch first, because if we sack a land to cycle edge and we actually draw the land that we were going to fetch, we've already made our land drop. So anyways, so we get Volcanic, and we cycle edge to draw the Massacre just in case they have, like, this is obviously pretty unrealistic, but if they had Swords to Plowshares, Solitude, and another white card, they could actually have gotten us. Because Solitude also is a creature, so. But anyways. We get to win, and we're 9-0 and locked for the top 8, which is just amazing. And on to round number 10. All right, round number 10 on the draw, and I decided to keep this hand. I think it's decent. And we're up against Mishra's Bauble here. They bauble us. They play Island Petal, and sadly for us, they have Chalice for 1, which right now means we have mulligan to 5. I cycle in response. Oh look, I mulligan to 4 instead. So this is the 8 cast deck, the mono blue sort of artifact, like all the baubles deck, and we draw more 1-drops. And yeah, this is what it can be like playing against Chalice of the Void. They aren't doing anything, but like we draw another 1-drop. We are ineffective. Like, we've been mind twisted for 5. That's kind of how this feels, in a weird way. So turn 3, they have Bauble. They bauble us. They see Volcanic Island. Just pass the turn again. The thing about this deck that we're up against is that it also plays like a lot of Force of Will effects, and can have like Torpor Orb and stuff like that post sideboard. So it's can be a pretty daunting matchup. We draw more lands, so we're not really going anywhere here. And it's at this point I'm fairly certain I'm going to lose this game. You know, with basically a 1-card hand and just 4 mana sources in play. We get more. They get more baubles. They're just like cycling through their deck basically. Slow tripping through their deck. Drawing cards. We draw more 1-drops, so just like feeling very sad face right now. And eventually, this is turn 5. Is it now that they start doing things? Yeah, so they have Emery. And they have Mox Amber and Emery milled over Sigh and Thoughtcast and some lands. And now they're going to be drawing 2 cards a turn with Emery. Like, that's the sort of floor for her. And drawing a 7th 1-drop now. My hand, yeah, it is pretty funny actually. I'm not sure why I haven't conceded yet, but I'm pretty sure I do concede fairly soon. So they get to make Sigh, cast a lot of baubles, make Thopter tokens. The game is certainly over here. They play Aether Spellbomb just to, like, even though it gets eaten up by the Chalice, they get more Thopter tokens. So, and we draw One more 1-drop, and I do think I concede now. Yeah. So that was not a very pleasant experience. All right, so sideboarding wise, I sided in the red blasts, which I think in retrospect was a mistake. Just because they don't really have a lot of good cards to pyroblast, to be honest. They have Force of Will and Force of Negation. Bringing in a card to trade 1-for-1 with Emery or Sai doesn't feel like where we want to be. And I think I was just sort of on auto mode because this deck is the cousin of the former sort of Echo of Eons Karn deck that had both Echo of Eons and Narset and Hull Breacher. So a lot of sort of really juicy and scary Red Blast targets, but this deck doesn't really. So I do kind of think I shouldn't have done that, and I think I keep this hand. It's very reactive. I play out my stuff here just in case, like, I don't know, they get Chalice for 0, which obviously would be kind of absurd, because half of their deck is like 0 drops. They play Emery, I let her resolve. They show us Thought Monitor and Force of Will. And I think I end up red blasting her nevertheless because they were just going to be drawing 2 cards a turn. So, and Thassa is drawn, so not the best, and we're kind of choked on lands here, which is bad. Meanwhile, they get to Urza Saga, which is phenomenal in this deck because the golems that Saga makes are just so big. So we brainstorm again, and again we get like kind of brainstorm locked. So this is looking worse and worse. If Consider can draw as a Dark Ritual next turn, then, you know, or I guess Ponder. If we can find Dark Ritual, that's something. We don't, but we find a land. I think I consider Thassa into the graveyard next turn. They make a 2/2, and that thing is going to grow really, really quickly, I think. And they find Bauble, have more Bauble. And they Thought Monitor, draw 2 cards, grow their construct. So they're just like yeah, as you can see, the deck is really, really fast once it gets Urza Saga going at making giant construct tokens. I take 8, and now it's basically I have to draw land and hope that they can't sort of interact with me, or like a Dark Ritual or a Petal. And I know the top 2 cards, so I do actually draw land. But actually, you know what happened? I had sided out LED, so the Consider into Deep Analysis kind of thing isn't even a thing. And I would even if I had LED, I would be on too low life total to cast to flashback Deep Analysis next turn. So I am kind of just dead here. So I consider. I'm not sure what I'm hoping to get, like Brainstorm into Dark Ritual into and like it is basically over. So I do concede here. So in round 10 we take the first loss, but at this point I remember feeling quite sort of burden free because I knew that I was a lock for the top 8 regardless. But yeah, this is a tough matchup. I think my opponent played well, and yeah, that just spewed all over us. All right, so on to the top 8. All right, so for the quarterfinals, I thought I was going to be on the play because I was higher seed, at least if those things can be trusted on the Magic Online event thing. But I think that you roll a dice apparently. So opponent starts. I get a nice hand here. They show us Yurion, and they mulligan to 5. So I think, oh, am I getting a 5th Death and Taxes opponent? But no. So they have the Misty Rainforest here. I just randomly, luckily draw like a relevant piece of interaction. Another thing would have been Force of Will, I guess. But we draw the Thoughtseize, and we Thoughtseize, and we see Sylvan Library and 3 lands. So not looking good for our opponent, but obviously they were going to be able to wasteland us next turn. So we do need to like take that into consideration, but I do feel like we were going to have a next turn win anyways, because we get to like make the top 2 cards of our deck something that makes blue mana, and then we get to draw 2 petals in the Pact of Negation. So I don't think we want all these cyclers that I'm watching myself put in the pile here. I'm pretty sure I changed my mind, but let's see. Yeah, so we go like this, and we just basically, as long as Pact is not in the top 2 cards of the deck, the rest of the order of things doesn't matter. Because they get Arbor here, so I'm like, it's definitely not a deck I'm familiar playing against. It's what I ended up learning is called, or like at least currently is named, 4-color Zenith. It looks pretty cool and actually kind of tricky because they have like Leovold and Endurance and a lot of forces and even access to white in terms of like having like I guess Meddling Mage and stuff like that. So we draw a petal and we cycle into another petal. They have 3 cards in hand and 2 of them are like land and prismatic ending, so they can't really have drawn anything that they can use here. And we get to have a pact anyways. So yeah, taking game 1 of the quarterfinals, and onto the sideboarding, and then onto game number 2. All right, so I bring in my red blasts. I don't think I brought an Emrakul, but I could be wrong. But I just remember like that, like an 80 card deck that seems like that had Wasteland. It's like, you're gonna be playing 4 Wastelands, I think. And I honestly don't remember exactly how I mulliganed, but in this hand, like 3 cantrips is a bit cantrip heavy. Daze is not great on the draw, especially when this hand is gonna probably force the game to go long. But yeah, let me see how we go. They just go for a land go. Okay, we draw Pyroblast. By the way, at this point it's like 4 a.m. or something, and I am just kind of wasted when I'm making these plays. So not to hedge my or cover my bases here, but that might be why. If I make some weird plays. Okay, so I think I decide to duress here, because if they have Veil or something, we can daze it. They have Brainstorm, and I decide to daze that. And we see not too scary of a hand here. So we obviously we take the Sylvan Library. We have Pyroblast, which can answer Force of Will if we get to put Doomsday on the stack at some point. And now they like, yeah, so they have to ponder. And they do not shuffle and play a Windswept Heath. So their hand is Dried Arbor, Force, and Savannah. We draw more cantrips and just pass here, because I want to be able to Pyroblast Leovold if they found Leovold, but they didn't. And there's a Wasteland. I think I probably consider here. Yeah. And we put Force of Will in the graveyard and draw another Consider. And we draw Edge of Autumn. And just decide to ponder. And we find Doomsday. So we're like 2 turns away from casting Doomsday here. Because we need to draw all 3 of these cards, and we can't do anything more this turn. But that also means we don't have, like, as is, we don't have any interaction. So I think we need to probably like brainstorm on next turn and hope to find like, oh, yikes, they had another wasteland. Yeah. So at this point, it's not looking too comfortable here. Just because their wastelands are really doing a number on us. So we get to draw here, and now we're just fresh out of like mana, and we have to start burning petals if we want to get anywhere. And we just get, I think, a bit crushed here. I think this is where we lose the game. Not finding lands. That is also sort of part and parcel of this deck. At times, you do play quite a few lands. Yeah, I'm churning through here trying to find stuff to do. I think, probably correctly Force of Will this Brainstorm off of a Petal. I force back. I'm now really low on cards. We find lands, but are still like some ways away from casting Doomsday. And I decide to put back Pyroblast. Partly because my Volcanic is already in the graveyard, and also just because they already used their Force of Will. And at this point, I think we have to prioritize just putting Doomsday on the stack. Okay, so we consider end of turn here. And we find a Ponder, draw it. Dark Ritual is there, so we actually get to try and put Doomsday on the stack. But they have Force for it. We have to shuffle here, and we get a Dark Ritual. Anyways, there's a Caracas. That's good to know about. We ponder, but shuffle. Sorry, I'm clicking through this a bit fast because the client is being weird. Hey, I don't need to do that anymore. But we shuffled on that ponder and drew a Scalding Tarn. They passed the turn. And we do find Doomsday. They only have 2 cards in hand, so it's possible. But they have Mystical Dispute. So this is not a card that sees that much play, but it's pretty cool. So they have to pay the full price, but they can. And this is basically just mana leak then. I have to pay 3 and I can't. So at this point, the game is over and it's on to game number 3. Alright, on to game number 3 of the quarterfinals. On the play, opponent reveals Yurion, obviously, and we get a really, like, a very good hand. It's a little bit soft to Wasteland, but yeah. So I start up by cycling Street Wraith, and I decide to not play into Wasteland and just pass the turn, and then probably end of turn Brainstorm, looking for the third land or the second land I need. So they just go green mana, green Sun Zenith for 0, getting Dried Arbor. So kind of interesting that they are just have their lands only make green. And we get to Brainstorm here. And we find a Petal. Obviously, it would have been more ideal to find another land because that makes us a little bit less vulnerable to Wasteland. But no complaints here. Put back the second Doomsday, second from the top, so we don't draw it. And we certainly Doomsday here with Force and Daze backup. And Dazing here is, I think, doubly sweet because it lets us protect our land and have it guaranteed for the beginning of next turn. So we didn't bring in Emrakul and Sheldog Isle. We did bring in Massacre, and I think in retrospect it might be wrong because they just aren't really a Hate Bears deck. So let's see if this is what I went with. No. Making piles is hard, especially at like 5 in the morning. This is the 5 cards. These are the 5 cards. And let's see. Yeah, so I think Magic Online is messing me up a bit, but I could be wrong. So we replay the land actually and ponder and draw the 2 cyclers, or like one of the 2 cyclers. We can cycle Edge in response to a wasteland if we need to. But no wasteland, they just pass, I think. Yeah, and they don't attack, which makes me curious if they have like what do you call it, like a hardcast endurance. So I think I just pass here. Because if they have endurance, it's like it's better to just wait and have actual cyclers in hand when endurance enters the battlefield. Because if you can't counter it, then you can at least like draw 2 cards off of your new deck, and that might sometimes be enough. Okay, so they brainstorm. We get lucky they don't have wasteland here, but they have something. So they have green suns for 3, which you would think probably means Leovold. But if they have Leovold, we can cycle once now. They untap, we take 4, we drop to 2, and then we can, during that turn, we can cycle again. And then combined with the draw step, we actually draw everything, and can even still force. But I guess that's not what I went with. So we cycle once, and they actually go with endurance after some consideration, which I really like that play. So my deck, I remember this now, this was crazy. So Doomsday, Ponder, and Street Wraith go underneath the 2 cards that are left in my deck, which are Cavern and I can't remember the last one. Maybe Pact, I'm not sure. So now we have a 5-card deck, and we're gonna be beaten down to 2 next turn. We draw the Cavern, so I decide to cycle Edge of Autumn, because look what we can do here. We can play Brainstorm. The endurance again, so the 3 cards, at this point I remember thinking, okay, I lost, but then I thought, no, hang on, there's a Ponder in the last couple of cards here, and we haven't made our land drop. So endurance puts Edge of Autumn and Underground Sea underneath. Brainstorm resolves. We put Force of Will in Doomsday, and then we both get to, we can draw 2 more cards here because we have Street Wraith and Ponder in hand. So we just draw whatever. And pass. That's not exactly how I remembered it, but I think, yeah, that would work, right? And they have 1 card left in hand. So we get to draw. We dodge the wasteland. And we just have to hope and pray they don't have like a 3rd endurance or like a dress down or something. We name Merfolk and we cross our fingers. They also like can't have removal here if they have Plow or like Assassin's Trophy or Decay or whatever. But they don't, so we got there. That was such a clenched fist moment, like the double endurance. Yeah, no, that was nuts. And we're on to the semifinals. All right, so semifinals. I am on the play. Don't know my opponent, and I get turn 1 Doomsday with Daze backup, and they reveal Yurion. So I'm thinking, all right. Like, that reveal is so important because it basically means it can be one of 3 decks at most. It's the most likely of which I think is like Death and Taxes. Then there is the deck I just played against, and then there's something like Espervile. In either case, I think it means that we jam here. Opponent mulligans to 6. And here we go. And opponent, well, shit. But they have the Force of Negation, which, I mean, that's obviously, we have to Daze here, which we luckily are able to, but it also informs us of what deck it is, so we know what pile to make. So Doomsday is in, and we make a pile of, let's see here. So Pact of Negation I saw. I must have clicked through it, but I think that's the bottom card. Oh, never mind, there it is. That's weird. So Cavern on the bottom, then Edge, then Pact, then Street Wraith and Thassa. I've never seen this happen this way before. I'm pretty sure the replay thing is not working and the pile was different, but we'll see. They go land, whatever. Okay, no, so we draw Thassa. And draw Street Wraith. Still not certain that this is actually showing what actually happened because it does seem quite a bit weird. But yeah, no, this isn't working. Yep. Okay, so I think if I had done this way, I could have cycled into Edge of Autumn and then cycled into Cavern and then won. So that probably is what happened, but sadly the replay function is not showing it. But we took game 1 nevertheless. Alright, so for game number 2, we sideboard in some Duresses and Massacre, I think, but I don't think I brought in the Pyroblasts. And we get this hand which we can't keep, so we mulligan. Get this hand, which is not amazing, but I'm pretty sure I probably keep this rather than going to 5. And they go Abundant Growth. I think here is where you actually would prefer if Consider was actually Preordain. It's just a stronger cantrip. We find a Ponder, which we take, and just pass the turn. So they go Carpet and Wasteland, which is a little bit of a tension, right? Because, yeah. But Carpet is in, they Ponder. They choose not to shuffle. We get to keep our land for the time being, and I'm pretty sure I've shuffled these. And draw a second Wraith. We Wraith into a land. And duress them. And they show us, like, so they have Endurance and they have Collector Oof. And we take the Abundant Growth, because that's all we could take. Because the rest are creatures, so this Carpet is really doing a lot of heavy lifting for them. They play the Oof, and they fetch a land, which is what they drew. And we draw another land and cycle our Street Wraith and draw Thassa, so we're really not doing a lot here. Looking less and less likely for us to win. They get to play Uru now and start like drawing cards, eventually putting a clock into play. We draw Force, which is just useless. Like this game was like the deck was not like spinning on all, running on all cylinders. So Uru is in play, and I think it's pretty close to drawing a concession from us. Like, we can Thoughtseize at least to see. Oh yeah, actually, we can chump with Thassa, and we want neither of these cards, so we scry both to the bottom. And we Thoughtseize. They have Force of Will and Carpet and Endurance. So it's not looking good here. Brainstorm is an excellent top deck, and they Zenith for 3 into Leovold into a concession. So on to game number 3. All right, game number 3, potentially the last game of my tournament. On the play, and I get yeah. So I mulligan to 6 because the first one had no lands. This also has no lands. But I'm really crestfallen here because it's like, okay, it's the deciding game of the semifinals, and I get 2 no landers, and I think I actually ended up deciding to keep this, just running a massive risk, especially also being on the play. It's like really sus. But if this hand ever gets a land, it's just amazing. So I scry a cantrip to the bottom, I think, and just decide to say, this is where we make our stand. Pass the turn. I'm sure our opponent was thrilled at this. They go Birds of Paradise, and we are rewarded. A land would obviously have been better. We had, I think, 13 lands that would get us there, and 4 petals, so 17 cards total. So we get to Doomsday, and they just let it resolve, and then we really have to think, how do we go from here, right? Because 0 lands, and they are on 3 mana next turn. And this was at like 5:30 in the morning. My mind was melting, I think. So let's see. We want the Cavern and the Thassa, and I think, yeah, okay. So I did actually bring in Emrakul and Sheldog Isle here, which I think in retrospect was wrong, but yeah. So the last card we like the card that would normally be like a piece of interaction is going to be an Underground Sea here, so that we can actually, if they Wasteland Sheldog, we can actually cast Thassa. And Sea on the bottom. No? Okay. I guess it doesn't matter. Yeah. Alright, we pass, and they of course play the Wasteland, which is kind of hilarious, really. And they go Zenith for 2, which means oof. We don't counter it because it's oof, and we don't have any artifacts in our pile. We have to play the Sheldog here, which is just basically, it cycles because of Wasteland. So we put Emrakul underneath there. Emrakul is going to be exiled forever shortly. And we just have to hope and pray at this point that the Force of Will is going to be good enough. So we draw Underground Sea and we Thoughtseize. And they Veil. And I can't remember what I did here, but I am feeling like getting sweaty palms just thinking about it, because, like, geez, what do you do here, right? You're standing at the cliff side at the end of the world, and it's like last game of the semifinals. So I decided to just let Veil resolve, thinking I am just going to stick with the Force of Will in hand rather than, like, so I can force whatever on top of their deck or whatever. But having them draw that card is really bad, obviously. And we have to, like, dodge Wasteland. I also think, like, potentially, like, it passed through my mind that Veil resolving meant that I didn't take the life loss, which could be relevant here as we're taking 2 down to 6, and we will be taking at least 2 more. So I think actually maybe I would have killed myself. That's funny. But we do, like, if they don't wasteland us, we do get to ponder next turn. Okay, so they're fetching and playing a meddling mage, which obviously we cannot have that resolve ever, so have to force that. We have no answer for it. We draw, it's Cavern. We just pass. And we just have to hope they don't have Wasteland. We also have to hope they don't have, like, Dress Down or Endurance. And we can beat, I think, anything else. I guess another Meddling Mage would be a problem. I saw this Ice Fang and thought that feels a little bit like a Desperation thing, and this Brainstorm too. Luckily, they didn't find the Wasteland. So, this is it. Do you have the Endurance? Dress Down is not a card now because they don't have mana for it. I don't know if they play Dress Down, obviously. But we just have to, yeah, clench our cheeks and put Thassa on the stack. Thassa resolved and we won, and I just could not believe it. So, obviously, very, very fortunate not like to dodge the cards. They must have been digging pretty furiously. And we were in the finals, so couldn't believe it. All right, so the finals, and we won the die roll. And at this point, I think just from looking at Twitter and stuff, I knew that my opponent was on Blue Red Delver. Pretty sure they knew what I was on. And we get this hand, so that's a pretty interesting hand. And we go turn 1 ponder, and we find both blue cards and a land, which is just what I wanted. So we draw Daze, and they go turn 1 Ragavan, which I let resolve because I know that I'm going to be playing Doomsday. It's not really that big of a problem. It does sort of switch off Daze, but Daze can just be pitched to Force of Will. So they bobble us and see Scalding Tarn on top. And we make Doomsday here. And it just resolves. And they were playing in a way that felt like they had F6, which means, for the uninitiated, that they had just, like, yielded priority until the end of turn, indicating they had no interaction. And I did have the Consider, so I could have gone for the same turn win. But I'm pretty sure I decided not to do that. Because sometimes people do that thing where they, like, yield, but then you can stop yielding at any point by clicking like F3, I think. So I didn't want to run the risk. Like, if they have Daze, we lose by trying to do the fast pile. So I make this pile, and I make it so that they will attack with Ragavan and exile a Street Wraith. And I think I mess up. I think I'm supposed to be drawing Edge of Autumn myself, but I ended up, like, letting them exile Street Wraith, letting them exile Edge, and then I win. Oh no, actually, maybe not. Yeah, no. Wait, what? Oh yeah, I had mana, and I had to Consider. I'm just all over the place here. So put Street Wraith into the graveyard, draw Edge of Autumn. Yeah, okay, it's coming back. And now we just win next turn, and we beat Wasteland as well. So they get to attack, and it doesn't matter if they didn't attack. We would still just draw the Street Wraith that they were going to be exiling now, and we could have cycled it. And it's the same life loss. So yeah, feeling pretty ecstatic at this point. About to be 1-0 up. I'm certain that there is no, like, stifle or anything to worry about, and they're digging furiously, looking for, I guess, force effects. But we just draw the Cavern, we exile, or sorry, cycle Edge, and there we go. And the sideboard plan Can I see the sideboard? Oh, I can, actually. So the sideboard plan for Delver is the 3 Pacts and 2 Duresses, and we board out 4 Force of Will and a Personal Tutor, I believe. Alright, so round game number 2. I mean, this hand has Doomsday and Dark Ritual, so not passing on this. And they go turn 1 Ragavan yet again. So that's kind of scary. And we Brainstorm here just because we don't want to get, like, I kind of want to make sure that I control what they're drawing with a Ragavan. And I think they very sort of astutely Daze that. So that's kind of crushing here because okay, no, so they exile Volcanic Island, so that's fine. They have another creature, 4 cards in hand, but now Dragon's Rich Chandler lets them just get so much card quality that it's crazy. Brainstorm is good, and Personal Tutor is like really useless when you have when you're facing them Ragavan. So part of me kind of wonders if I should have just gone for it there, but I didn't. So they Brainstorm. Their Dragon's Rage Chancellor's now what do you call it? Delirious. And here is where we lose the game because they hit one of our 4 discard spells. And they take Doomsday, obviously. I consider, after playing around Daze, I put Street Wraith into the graveyard and just draw land. And they attack again. I'm at 7, and they hit a Ponder, and I think I just concede here. Yeah, you know, you could definitely argue that you should keep playing, but like it's after those 2 hits off Ragavan and the makeup of my hand. That's yeah, kind of rough. So on to game 3. So game 3 and the last game of the tournament. Get this, can't keep it. Mulligan to this, which is also pretty terrible. Keep it. Hope that Street Wraith can cycle into something. It doesn't. We cast Petal and Ponder, and already now we're feeling like I'm pretty sure I've lost here because it's just not really, I think, realistic to come back from this sort of card deficit. But it's not over till it's over, obviously, and we get some cards we can't. We really want the Dark Ritual, actually, but yeah, no, I think we take the Dark Ritual and then the Pact of Negation, even though the Pact isn't really gonna save us. Because we would have to win on the same turn, but this way we can like duress next turn. And they of course have Ragavan. Turn 1 on all 3 games. So I mean that's also really good, but I'm not gonna whine about it because my deck had been cooperating so much during the tournament. We see the dagger. The dagger here, it's the wasteland. We have 1 land. So we take Force of Negation and just have to hope that I think maybe I was supposed to cycle Edge there, but oops. Okay. Sorry, that happened a bit quickly. So they swung with Ragavan, exiled my Deep Analysis, which they couldn't cast, and then played a Delver. But I guess I do see if I had cycled the Edge there, then we have no way to sort of go off on the same turn. And yeah, sadly, this is at this point I've pretty much sort of conceded in my head to the fact that I'm going to be losing this. But it is what it is. I had very good matchups throughout the day, and I got some really amazing hands. And then I faced my bad matchup of them sort of tier 1 decks in the finals, and sadly couldn't get through. You need to, you can't really wobble in this matchup and get like mulligan to 5 kind of thing, which I guess I did, and I mulligan to 6, but I had to like spew a Lotus Petal. So at this point, I end up sort of just dying, I think. Yeah. They get the Thoughtseize, so then it is effectively over. Place a Channeler just to get the Scry. Or Surveil, I guess. And there we go. So that was it. That was the last game in the finals, and very much want to say congratulations to Billy, the opponent, Badlock Bandit. Played really well, had an amazing run, and deserved to win. And yeah, but I just can't believe that I actually made it that far, and I was really happy about that, as I think I've said like a million times in this video, so sorry about that. Yeah, I wish I could have been recording. I'm sorry that there were all these sort of weirdo Magic Online replay functions not working properly and stuff, but I hope you still enjoyed it. I certainly had a blast, and I want to thank you for watching. I'll be back with some more Legacy. Bye bye.